Good afternoon, everyone. I see many new faces, so I hope you will catch up with us as we carry on with the text. So, how many of you were not here yesterday? Yes, the majority, I think. Okay, so I would just briefly explain that this is a text by a very eminent Bengali scholar who went to Tibet in the 11th century and remained in Tibet and died there. And he had an enormous influence on the current of Buddhism in Tibet after his stay there. His name was Dipankara Atisha. And he was, as I say, he was a great scholar. He was Chancellor of Vikramashila Monastic University in UP, and was considered in his day to be the preeminent authority on Buddha Dharma, which is why he was invited to Tibet. So yesterday I explained that according to Tibetans, very dramatic reasons why he went to Tibet, but today we'll skip that and just carry on with this text. It's a very short text, but I think it covers a lot of ground, actually. So now we have gone through the first few lines, and we are now on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're now on line 9. Okay, so now Atisha is going to talk about what are called the paramita, which are the qualities needed in order to attain to Buddhahood. Sometimes nowadays, especially, people assume that Buddhahood is acquired purely through meditation, but in the traditional Mahayana texts, there are many other qualities which are necessary in order to awaken to the full potential of Buddhahood. Okay, so these qualities are qualities which are necessary for us to develop in order to acquire all the various qualities of a fully enlightened being. So it starts with generosity, dana, because normally generosity, because in order to open up our heart, we need to open up our hands. So in the traditional Mahayana texts, there are many, many explanations on the various kinds of generosity, not just generosity of material goods, but also generosity of helping others, of listening to others, of sharing our spiritual understanding, and so forth. That there are many, many aspects to opening up towards sharing with others, and how important that is on the spiritual path, that we are willing to share and to, in this way, be very generous. And in all Buddhist countries, one is quite overwhelmed by the extraordinary generosity of the people. I mean, they give beyond their means with joy. And they rejoice in the generosity of each other too. It's very touching because, you know, our instinctive reactions are to hold on to what we have. If I don't have it, then how will I manage? But in so many parts of Asia, this spontaneous joy in giving is a very, very beautiful quality, and is also considered to be the first step on the spiritual path. Even if we cannot be great scholars, even if we cannot be great meditators, even if our ethics are a little bit iffy, we can be generous. We can give and rejoice in that, not by promoting ourselves and, writing about it in advertisements in the newspapers, but even secretly, just giving and that joy of that. So in many of the texts, there are large sections on the importance of generosity. But Atisha takes all these very well-known paramita, these qualities which everybody would know about already, and gives them a twist. So here, instead of exalting, the perfection of generosity is, to you delight in giving, he says, the supreme generosity is non-attachment. It's so simple. Why are we not generous? Because we are attached to what we have. This is mine. This is mine. I'm not going to share it with others because I need it. If I don't have it, then how will I manage? So that grasping mind causes us to be not generous. Why are we not more generous? Why don't we give more? Because we grasp what we have and we are afraid of letting go. The Buddha said that the cause of our suffering, the cause of our dukkha, is attachment, is grasping. It's the fact that we hold on and we cannot let go. We hold on to people, we hold on to possessions, we hold on to status, we hold on to everything, grasping, fearing that we may lose. We may lose people we love, we may lose our possessions, we may lose our good name, we may lose everything that we hold on to. So along with the holding on is the fear of loss. And that fear of loss is a big tension in people's lives. People are often very, very anxious. And they're anxious because they're afraid that things will change and that we will lose that which we hold so dear. But everything is changing. Everything is impermanent. Nothing stays the way it has been. As we said yesterday, it's a river that's flowing. And we may think it's the same river, but actually every element in that river has changed. And the fact that we don't want it to change, that we want it to stay dammed up, when it can never be dammed, causes suffering. Because it causes fear, anxiety, grief. The amount of our grief is commensurate with the amount of our attachment. So, therefore, this first paramita basically says, let go. It doesn't mean that we all have to then walk away and renounce everything, but it means that we can hold it more lightly without this tight grasping attitude of the mind. It's very important. And in our modern society, we are encouraged to get more and more and more of most things which are totally non-essential, not necessary. and just clutter up our lives. And, you know, it stacks up more. You know, in America, there are actually now businesses which send out people to help other people declutter their lives. They have got so much stuff, they cannot move. This is true. Because now you can order everything online. And so not only can you order everything online, but if you buy 3, you get 1, you know, at a discount. So, well, what's the use of having 1? Let's get 3. And then you've got 3 of whatever, and you don't know what to do with it. And so it piles up and piles up and piles up, and in the end, people can't move. But they can't let go. They can't, nonetheless, just clear it all out because they're so attached. So they have to rent people to come and clear out for them. And they close their eyes, I can't look. And they just carry it all away. This is true. This is true. It becomes a sickness. I mean, it's the extreme of attachment, but it's that. They cannot give anything away. But they can accumulate more and more and more until they're suffocating. So, therefore, Atisha says, the supreme generosity is not to grasp, not to cling, non-attachment. Non-attachment doesn't mean that we don't value anything. I mean, when we talk about non-attachment among people, it doesn't mean that therefore we are detached in the sense of being remote and not interacting with others and not caring about others. It doesn't mean that. The Buddha himself talked a lot about loving kindness and compassion and empathy with all beings. I mean, we can definitely love beings, but it doesn't mean we have to grasp at them. It doesn't mean that we have to be attached to people or to things. We can have things that we value and we appreciate, but then if we lose them or if we give them away, the degree is our attachment to those things, not the things themselves. There is a story, I'm sure many of you being mostly Indians will know, of this king in ancient India. And he was a Raja, so he had a nice palace full of beautiful things. But he was a very devout king. And he had a guru who was a sannyasi. So the sannyasin only wore, you know, the king was in his brocades, but the sannyasin was just in his little dhoti. And all that the sannyasin owned was a wooden bowl, alms bowl. And so one day they were sitting in the garden, and the guru was teaching the king. And meanwhile, servants came running up and saying, "Oh, Maharaj, Maharaj, quickly, quickly, the whole palace is in flames." And the king said, "Don't bother me. I am studying Dharma from my guru. You deal with the fire." He had no attachment. Meantime, the guru jumped up and said, "What do you mean? My wooden bowl is in the palace." So that's the point. The point is not how much we own, but how much what we own owns us. Because some people have so much, but if they lose it, then they just say, "Oh, well, so what?" Other people can have very little, but if they lose it, they're filled with grief. So it's not the actual objects. It's not the objects. I mean, things are innocent. They are just things. The problem is not the things. The problem is our relationship with those things. how much we cling to them, how much we depend on them, how much we identify with them. This is the problem. So we can have outwardly so much, inwardly we are free. Or we can have not much, but we are still caught by our attachment to those things. So the question, therefore, to test ourselves with is also, how willing are we not to have those things? How willing are we to share? If we find somebody gives us something nice, are we willing to share? Or do we say, oh no, this is mine? One time when I was in England, I went to visit some Sufi friends who had a small son. He was about 3 or 4. And someone had bought him a box of chocolates. So he was so excited. He was only 4, and a whole box of chocolate. Wow! And so he was holding on to these chocolates. And his parents said, well, offer a chocolate to the nun. No, they're mine, he said. And so his father said, yes, of course they're yours. That's why you can share them with others. And the little boy thought about that because he was only 4. And his tightness of, this is mine. Yes, they're mine, so I can share. So then he opened the box and he insisted that everyone in the room took a chocolate. And he was so happy. Look, he had something to share. And I thought, what a beautiful lesson to learn when you're so young. That we have things, so isn't it beautiful? We can share with others. So this is what Atisha is talking about. It's not what we give, but the fact that we can give. And that we are not so attached to our possessions and that we don't want to share with others. So the supreme generosity is that we are simply not clinging to what we have, but that we delight in giving to others. It's a very beautiful quality of the hands and of the heart. And often, not just to give things you don't want anyway, but give things that you love, and therefore you want somebody else also to delight in it as we delight in it. And also not just to give to people you like or who are close, but also give to people who are sometimes difficult and who we find hard to get along with. Sometimes that is also a very beautiful way of healing that we give. Generosity is a very beautiful quality and is the beginning of the path towards full enlightenment. The ability to let go and to share. So then the second paramita is ethics. So he says the supreme ethical conduct is to pacify one's mind. So again, when we think of ethics, we mostly think of it in the terms of our physical actions and our speech. The 5 precepts, which are incumbent on all Buddhists, whether they keep them or not, they're supposed to observe them, are dealing with our physical and verbal actions. They are intended to live in the world harmlessly. So these 5 precepts are the precepts not to take life. That means not only life of human beings, but of animals and insects and birds and fish and any being. Why? Because just as we hold our own life as most precious, all beings hold their own life as most precious. It's nothing to do with their size or their species. If we had a little ant here, and I went like that and tapped, that ant would immediately rear up and run away because he thinks, danger, something's going to harm me. And so it tries to protect itself. So for all beings, their own life is most precious. So what right have we to take the life of another being? So just because it's small or it annoys us, who are we to say that we have the permission just to take that life? And also when we take life, it is usually with a quite negative frame of mind, so it's considered to be very negative karma also. So the first precept, therefore, is not to take life. The second precept is not to take what is not given, which means not to steal. And I think that also would include if we borrow something from somebody, that we should give it back and not be, like somebody lends us a book, we give the book back. If somebody lends a DVD, we give it back in as good condition as we got it. And take care of respect other people's property. It's so that people can trust us and know that we are not going to do anything which would cause any harm. The third precept is concerned with our sexual conduct, that we therefore have ethical guidelines so that we never use our sexuality in any way that would exploit others, objectify others, or cause any problems to others or to ourselves. That we are responsible for our sexuality and not irresponsible. And we don't hurt anybody, including ourselves. The fourth precept is to do with speech, that speech should be truthful. People should be able to trust us. We are not going to cheat anybody. If what we say we believe to be true, as far as we know. But at the same time, it's not just true. It should also be kind, because, some people delight in being very truthful, but their truth is something which is going to hurt the other person. And so we should be careful that our speech is not only truthful, but it is kind and it is not divisive, telling one person something against another person so that they, causes a split in their relationship. And also it shouldn't just be a lot of meaningless chatter. We spend a lot of our time distracting ourselves by gossip and talking, things which honestly and truthfully are not worth talking about. So our speech should be meaningful, it should be truthful, and it should be kind and non-divisive. So that, again, because why? We as human beings are the only animals who rely on language to communicate. Other animals communicate with each other very well, but they don't use verbal language. They have other ways to communicate. But human beings, whether good or bad, we have lost the ability to communicate, except through language. And so therefore we should be very careful of our language, and we should be careful that it does not cause hurt to others. We are very perverse, and normally remember all the negative things we have heard about ourselves, and we forget all the good. So that if we speak harshly to others, it's like a knife in their heart. And they often remember it years later, the things which they heard, maybe from their parents, or from friends, or from whoever. And all the good that was ever said is forgotten, and just these harsh words stay there in their heart. And so we should be careful. I one time had a friend from, I think she was from Korea, and she was very attractive. She was a businesswoman and very successful, very intelligent, and very nice lady, but she was very depressed, always. And eventually it was found that it's because when she was a child, her mother one day had screamed at her, "Oh, you're so stupid, and you're ugly, and nobody will ever love you." And those words stayed in our heart. So although she was very attractive, she had a very nice partner, she was very successful, only she was telling herself, "You're stupid and you're ugly and nobody will ever love you." This is the fact of the matter. So many people hold this inner dialogue with themselves, which is usually very critical, very unkind, but based on something which someone said to them at some point, which, as I say, like a dagger, sits in their heart. So we should be very scrupulous with our use of language and be very careful, even if we are annoyed and angry with people, not to say things which will undercut their sense of confidence in their own abilities. And we should use language which encourages people and makes them feel good, which is healing language, not destructive language. But, so normally this is how it is explained, and the fifth precept is against alcohol and drugs and anything which intoxicates the mind, because Buddhism is always concerned about the mind and becoming the masters of our mind. Instead of being the slaves, we have to be the boss and not just serving the defilements of the mind. So therefore, when we take intoxicants, such as alcohol and drugs, then we lose control. And as we know, most of the crimes which are committed while the people themselves are in an intoxicated state of mind, both through alcohol and through drugs. And so this is, when we're drunk, or, when we're high on certain drugs, then all these other precepts get broken. Everybody knows now that the crime rate is mostly because of this tremendous epidemic of alcohol and drugs. So we need a sober mind, we need a clear mind, we need a mind in which we are aware, where we are mindful, not a mind which is drowned out and we are completely unaware and mindless. Because also when people get drunk, it doesn't bring out the better qualities in our nature. I mean, at the best, people get silly, but often they also get very aggressive. And so, therefore the fifth precept is against any kind of intoxicants, so that we can keep a clear mind which is able to observe the other four precepts. So this is the normal way that ethics is taught, that we have a responsibility in this world not to use our speech or our actions in any way which will harm others, so that if we live harmlessly in the world, even if we don't do much good, at least we're not hurting anybody. So that is like a fence around the garden of our heart that, keeps out all the wild animals who will come in and eat all the beautiful plants that we are trying to grow in the garden of our heart. So that is how ethics is usually understood. It's not to harm others. But all of that is based on our intention. The Buddha said that karma is intention. It's our motivation, not the action itself so much as the underlying motivation which causes us to act or speak in that way. Therefore, the root of having perfect ethics is to have a calm, clear, peaceful mind. If our mind is peaceful, we will naturally not wish to harm others in any way. Mostly we cause problems and harm others because we ourselves have a very problematic kind of mind. Our mind is not under our control. Our mind is chaotic, and this causes us to do and say things which we should not do and say. Our mind is dominated by our negative emotions, our klesha, such as anger and greed and jealousy and pride and all sorts of negative emotions which cause us to harm others and to do things which are considered to be ethically very negative. So the root of all our negative actions of body and speech is the mind. And so this is why Atisha says that the supreme ethical conduct is to pacify one's mind. If one's mind is quiet and clear and peaceful, and our negative emotions have been pacified, then naturally our actions of body and speech will also be pacified and will not be harmful. So the root of keeping perfect ethics is to have a clear and peaceful mind. So then the third of these paramita is patience or forbearance or tolerance. The supreme patience is to take the lowest place. Now, Atisha, when he came to Tibet, emphasized very much, as we explained yesterday, the qualities of the bodhisattva path, the aspiration for enlightenment for the sake of all beings, known as bodhicitta. And he emphasized also having a firm foundation in ethics and study and so forth. He really tried to keep Tibetan Buddhism on track. But his disciples founded a tradition called the Kadampa, and they wrote many texts, many of them dealing with, as I said yesterday, how to take difficulties onto the path. Because very often when we have obstacles like sickness or difficult people in our lives or problems, loss, and so forth, all these difficulties which come into our life, we take that as an opportunity not to practice. Oh, I would love to study and meditate, but I'm sick, or my father just died, or I've lost all my money, or I have so many problems in my life that I really would love to carry on and have a spiritual life, but I have all these worldly problems and I just can't deal with it. And so the beauty of the teachings from Atisha down through his disciples, down the centuries, was that they took those very circumstances which are regarded as obstacles and said, these are our greatest opportunities for genuine practice. And they showed how. They didn't just say, yeah, our biggest obstacles are our greatest opportunities, so get on with it. They showed how to change our attitude. So their teaching is called Lojong. And Lo means the mental faculties, the mind, and Jong means to train. So it's called mind training, but it's not just the mind, it's our whole attitude towards difficulties, taking difficulties onto the path, making our difficulties into the path. So there are many books, and nowadays in the West also there is a lot of interest in this, because people's lives are very stressful, very difficult. And so there's now more and more interest, not only in Tibetan Buddhist circles, but also in other Buddhist circles, and even in Christian circles, of learning more about this whole way that we can change our way of seeing things, so that what appears to be our biggest obstacles does indeed become spiritually our greatest opportunities to grow up. One of the problems is always that, even though outwardly we grow up and we grow old, inwardly, so often our attitude is still that of a rather spoiled little 4-year-old. If you have a child and you give it what it wants, it is all smiles and sweetness, all dimples. But as soon as it doesn't get what it wants, or it gets what it doesn't want, it is hysterical. It's angry, it's crying, it's furious, it goes into a whole traumatic attitude. When I get what I want, happy, happy. When I don't get what I want, anger, frustration, fury. Little children are like that because they have no control. And as we grow older, we learn to control outwardly that reaction. But so often, inwardly, it's still the same. When things go the way I want, when the ego gets what it wants, oh, happy, happy, smiles. And when we don't get what we want, when things don't go the way I want them to go, then inwardly we are so angry, frustrated, upset, grieved. Why? Because things are the way they are and not the way I want them to be. And so we are inwardly still little children. The Buddha called us the childish. And a lot of the path is about maturation, to mature. To mature, become mature and liberated. Mindrol. We have a monastery down the road called Mindroling, the place of maturing and liberation. So maturing means inwardly we have to stop being spoiled little children. We have to grow up. All our wrinkles and white hair, it's nothing. That's not the problem. Inside, very often people are still the same, reacting happy when things go right, and angry or frustrated or depressed when things don't go the way I want them to go. So, these teachings of Atisha, a lot of that was addressing this very problem and teaching us how to grow up and take everything with us and learn from whatever happens to us. When good things happen, that's really nice. No one's saying we have to deliberately create problems. But when problems come, then to deal with that in a mature manner, which helps us to grow up and to spiritually be enhanced. Somebody said that life is the gymnasium of the soul, right? So if we go to a gymnasium, then we are faced by all those awful machines which are designed to challenge us. You see people on the bicycle or on the runner, sweat pouring down them. They pay for this. Why? Because they know that that suffering they are going through and challenge is going to make them strong and fit They are going to be healthier as a result. Lying on the sofa, watching television might be easier, but getting to work on those machines is going to be much more beneficial, right? We all know that. So we can look on our life's experience like a gymnasium, and sometimes we have to really do a workout. Why? In order to become inwardly strong. If everything is always too easy, we think, oh, I'm such a nice person, I'm always very pleasant, I never have, I'm so sweet, really. But the minute we are challenged, and things do not go the way I want them to go, that's when we discover where we're really at. Not within ease, but with the challenges. So one of the ways that in the Lojong teaching we are taught is not to think of oneself as the most important. In Tibetan it says to put oneself as the lowest. But it doesn't mean that we therefore, in this world when people have such low self-esteem already, doesn't mean that we have to, tell ourselves we're useless and we're hopeless and we're no good, because that also is not the point. The point is that we're not actually, when we are meeting with others, we are the least important. And the other person is the most important. So we're not, when we are with others, we are not always thinking, what are they thinking about me? Are they impressed with me? Did I say that right? Is that okay? Wonder whether they're impressed with how I am. That is such a burden for the mind. First of all, because we never can know what other people think of us. And secondly, who cares anyway? Because they're worrying what you're thinking about them. Right? So therefore, drop our concern with our own importance here. The other person that we are with is at that moment the most important person in the world. Why? Because it's the person we are with. And it doesn't matter who that person is. It's not a matter of, yes, we have to impress people of high status and we don't care about other people. It's nothing to do with that. Also, the Buddha said that to each one, his own self is most dear. And that has nothing to do with their external status. Each person is most important to themselves. So therefore, when we meet with others, we respect that. And we respect that each one is important to themselves. And we are interested in that person. We're not interested in ourselves. We're interested in them. So also, when we meet with people with this practice of patience or forbearance, the idea is that normally, of course, we like people to be nice to us. We like people to be kind and friendly and say the right things and be nice. And, we want to trust people and we, of course. But human beings, being what they are, filled with all these negative emotions, which cause them suffering as well as others, many people are not especially nice and charming. They don't say what we want them to say, even within the family, especially within the family. So people often say things, do things, which are very challenging. And maybe they become angry with us or they say bad things about us. And then our reaction is to be angry back, to defend ourselves, to say nasty things back which will hurt them because they're saying things which hurt me. And so I want to get my own back. And then that just creates an endless cycle. of bad feeling and saying things which later one might regret. And, it just doesn't solve the problem. As the Buddha said, hatred does never cease by hatred. It only ceases through non-hatred. So, how to develop non-hatred in the face of hatred? How to not be angry in the face of others' anger? Well, through the cultivation of forbearance or patience. Sometimes people think that to be patient in the face of difficulties is a weakness, but actually to be angry when somebody is angry is a weakness. The real strength is when we don't get angry, when people are doing things which we don't want to hear, doing things which we don't want to see. That we have the patience, because if we develop the patience, we also have clarity of mind to see the situation and to see how to deal with the situation skillfully. When we are angry, we are not skillful because we are distorted by our anger. Even if we think it's righteous anger, nonetheless, it causes us to do things which do not create harmony in that situation. So therefore, in the Lojong teachings, these mind training teachings, it is always taught that if you meet somebody or you're dealing with somebody who is very difficult, then instead of seeing them as it were the enemy, we should see them as our most precious teacher. Why? Because they are our opportunity to practice patience or forbearance. And that practice of patience or forbearance is a very important constituent of the spiritual path. And we cannot learn to be patient if we don't have anyone who annoys us. We need people to be difficult. I mean, you don't have to be helpful to other people by being difficult the whole time. But when we do come across people who are difficult, then instead of getting upset, we can think, oh, thank you so much, you're so obnoxious. Really, you're a big helper on the path. Thank you, thank you. And then if you think like that, they even say you can put them on top of your head, and like you would pay respect to your guru. Then if you think of that, it will probably make you laugh. And that will help to dissipate the anger also, So this is the normal way that we deal with the idea of patience. It does not, of course, mean that we are stupid. And if someone is cheating us or is being really abusive and so forth, this is also a very bad karma for them. And we don't need to let them get away with it just because we are practicing our patience. But with our patience, we can nonetheless see clearly how to deal with this situation more skillfully so that they are prevented as much as possible from continuing with their negative actions. If we are carried away by very strong negative emotions in the face of their negative emotions, then we don't see clearly and we will act unskillfully and later probably regret it. But if we have clarity that we can stand back and say, okay, this is the opportunity for me now to be strong, not to give in to anger in the face of their irrational behavior, to see clearly the situation, how they are, and to deal with it skillfully, then that is an enormous step forward on the path. Do you understand? This is something because everybody has to deal at some time with people who are being irrational or difficult or, just mean. And so this is a way of dealing with it without creating more negativity. It's a way of being an antidote to that poison And at the same time, it helps us to strengthen our own inner poise by not giving in to negative emotions in the face of others' emotions, but by using it as a genuine spiritual practice. And really keeping one's own inner presence, one's own mindfulness very clear. And then from that, seeing how best to deal with the situation without just being carried along by our negative emotions. So this is why patience is such an important quality on the path. This ability to be more tolerant, to be more forbearing, and not endlessly just react, like a push button, when you want to get, and those machines where you want coffee or tea and you push a button and out comes the coffee, out comes the tea. I mean, we are like that. Somebody says something nice to us, we're all happy. Somebody says something mean and we get all upset. We're just like these machines. So we have to go beyond that kind of mentality and take difficulties onto the path and use them and recognize that maybe this was the best thing which ever happened. At the time it might seem difficult, but later on, looking back, many people find the difficult times in their lives were the times when they really learned the most. Things really changed the most inside. It wasn't all theory anymore. Now this is the practical application. We're faced with something which is very, very negative for us. How do we respond skillfully? So he says that therefore to take the lowest place. So in other words, in this case, just not to see our winning. For example, if we're in an argument, we don't have to win. I mean, the Tibetans love to debate and they really want to win. Even our nuns, whoa, you should see them. But in everyday life, we don't always have to win the arguments. We can take the lowest place. It doesn't matter. What difference does it make anyway? If it makes them happy to win, even if we know they're wrong, nonetheless, okay, it makes them happy, be happy. So mostly we can do that. I mean, there are times when people are doing things which we can see are not skillful at all, in which we have to stand up for our own viewpoint. But still we can do that without anger. We can do that clearly and logically and win our point or not. But the point is that as soon as we get caught up in negative emotions, then we have already lost the game, even if we win the argument. The supreme effort is to let go of all activity. Oh, Atisha. So again, effort is, it doesn't just mean pushing hard, but it means having an enthusiasm for what we are doing. Because when we do something, if we really enjoy doing it, then even our effort appears quite effortless. It's like people who are interested in sport or in music or in art or in any skill that we wish to accomplish. If we love doing it, then it doesn't seem like a hard effort because we enjoy it. In classical Buddhism, the four right efforts are considered to be that of overcoming and transforming our negative emotions, and trying to see that future negative emotions do not arise, and at the same time cultivating the good qualities of the heart, like our generosity and patience and compassion and kindness, and trying to encourage more and more positive emotions to arise in the future. So that is the classical, that we are dealing with the negativities, and by being aware of them and uprooting them like weeds in a garden, we are endlessly having to pull out the weeds, but at the same time, we have to water and fertilize the good plants. We cannot just be caught up in pulling out weeds. We also have to look, right? We have all these beautiful plants which are growing. We have to appreciate them, water them, and encourage them to grow more and more. So this is considered to be right effort, to keep the garden of the heart looking very nice. But here he's saying that the supreme, the best effort is to let go of all activity. So I'm not sure ever quite exactly what he means by that. We have the expert here, but I guess he's not going to say anything. I can think of it from the point of view of meditation. From the point of view of, I don't know what he's talking about. What I feel is that it is very important, as I said, to really enjoy what we are doing, insofar as if we enjoy it, it no longer becomes an effort. Because if we are doing something which we do not enjoy, then everything which we do is, it seems like very hard for us to do it. So therefore the question is how to turn all our activities, not only those that we enjoy, our hobbies or our particular passions, not only those which we naturally can enjoy, but all the activities, if we can, how to transform that so that it becomes effortless. And the way for that is through, in the Hinduism they have karma yoga and the idea of seva. And that's very beautiful because it turns all the actions that we do, all our activities, into the spiritual path. Spiritual path is not just about study and meditation. It's about taking everything which we have and transforming it throughout the day. And in Buddhism, this is done through cultivating awareness and mindfulness, so that it doesn't matter what action we are doing. If we do it in the full light of our awareness of what we are doing, then it becomes effortless. Even something like walking or anything, drinking tea, writing, working, cleaning. Someone was talking just now about how they're thinking to introduce here a kind of a program of seva for the guests, that the guests give back as well as receive. And they were thinking, because one of the founders here had been a monk in Thailand, and in that particular monastery there was an emphasis on cultivating one's attention in all actions, especially sweeping. So, in all monasteries there's a lot of land that needs to be swept every day. In our nunnery, after the morning puja and meditation, the smaller nuns are all out with their brooms sweeping. And chattering like little minor birds. We keep trying to get them to be more mindful. But the point is that the action of sweeping and cleaning and washing dishes and cooking and so forth, which could be a chore, could be, oh God, this again, if we do it with awareness, with presence, with mindfulness, it becomes a very profound spiritual practice. This means that while we are doing something, we just do it, and we are knowing that we are doing. It's the knowing quality of the mind. And we are not swept away by thoughts of the past or anticipations of the future or running around planning what we're going to do next. We are just completely present with what we're doing. Because actually, that's all there is. The past is gone. The future has not yet come. The only time we have is now. And if while we are now, we're thinking about somewhere else, we've already lost it. But if we take very simple actions, like sweeping and cleaning and chopping vegetables or walking, anything, and we bring our attention to it very gently, very clearly, not tight, keeping the mind relaxed, but focused, then our everyday actions become a Dharma practice. People are always saying they have no time to practice, but as long as we are breathing, we can practice. And if our mind gets agitated, bring the attention back to breathing in, breathing out. And in that way, our actions become non-actions, because it's moment to moment to moment awareness. So I don't think this is what Atisha meant, but this is what I mean. So if we practice in this way, then what looks outwardly like effort, it becomes effortless. But unfortunately, it takes a lot of effort to be effortless, because our minds are habituated to being unmindful. Our minds are habituated to distraction. And so therefore, to center our attention in the present, it takes work, because our minds are habituated not to dwell in the present. Our minds are habituated to be everywhere else, in the past, memories, ideas, thoughts about what happened before, 2 minutes before, 2 years before, 20 years before, however long. We are always thinking in the past, or we are planning and anticipating the future, 2 minutes, 20 years. To be present with what actually is happening takes, in the beginning, some effort. Not the effort to be present, but the effort to remember to be present. Because we get lost, we forget. Okay, I'm going to now wash the dishes. So then we start washing dishes, but then next thing we're thinking about what we have to do next. And oh, got off, I'm thinking about something, bring it back. And then we're doing it for 2 minutes, we're present. Isn't this nice? Wow, this is very nice just to be here. Nothing, just being here with the water and the dishes. And then we start thinking how nice it is to be with water and dishes. And really, I like doing it like this. And it's blah, 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 blah again. And we've lost it. Like I've lost this. Here we go. So it takes practice. Buddhists are always talking about practice. Like if you're a musician or a sports person, in order to perform, you need to practice. So Buddhists are always talking about their practice. You never actually get to the main performance, but we're always practicing. So to use our life as our Dharma practice is not to waste our life. Otherwise, at the time of death, we will think, oh, what happened? Where did that go? What did I do with my life? But if we really try to bring the Dharma into our daily life through our mindfulness, through cultivating the qualities of the heart, our kindness, generosity, patience, and so forth, using whatever happens to us in our daily life as the practice, then when it comes time to die, tomorrow, next year, 20 years, who knows when, we can die without regret. We can die knowing we did something worthwhile to benefit ourselves and to benefit others. That can only happen. It's not going to happen with just half an hour of meditation every day and the rest of the time our mind completely swept away and totally distracted. And this day and age is very easy, especially for young people, to be very, very distracted, including monks and nuns. So we have to make an effort to counteract that tendency of the mind to run off in all directions and to start to train it to be happy to be where it is, which is right now in the moment. And for that, we need to cultivate the ability to be aware. The supreme concentration is not altering the mind. So this is definitely a meditation instruction. Just look at the Tibetan for a minute. Okay, so the Sanskrit word is jhana. In Tibetan is something. So mostly when people think about meditation, they think of concentrating the mind, keeping it very rigidly fixed on one object, and in this way pacifying the mind so that eventually there will be no thoughts and we will be in a state of samadhi. So when most people talk about meditation, that's what they think, that by whatever kind of focus we are going to use, either a mantra or light or a bindu or whatever, the breath, an image, we have to focus on it very tightly, not allow any other thought to interfere, and be one-pointedly concentrated on the object of our meditation. So until finally, as I say, then the background thoughts will slowly evaporate and disappear, and we will be in a state of one-pointed concentration. So that is what many people think of as meditation, but this is not what Atisha is recommending. Atisha is saying that we don't need to alter the mind. Yeah, we don't need to make it artificial in any way. What we need to do is to know the mind. So, therefore, in this kind of meditation, we do have an object of concentration. For example, the breath. We observe the breath going in and the breath coming out, especially the breath coming out. But instead of fixating on that, concentrating rigidly on that, we merely use the object of meditation as a support. It's like holding it so that we stand up straight. We don't need to hold in it and tightly, but just to get balance. Because we are trying to develop the innate awareness of the mind. So we don't have to change the mind. What we have to do is know the mind. And in order to know the mind, we need to be aware. Awareness we always have. The fact you can hear me and see me and think about this means that you are conscious. Right? We are all conscious. But we are not usually conscious of being conscious. We're not usually aware of being aware. So genuine meditation, which is, for those of you who were here yesterday, we talked quite a bit about the nature of the mind, the empty lucidity of the mind. That's what we're trying to recognize as our primordial awareness. And in order to do this, first we have to develop the ability simply to be present, open, and aware. And so the object of the meditation is just to support us so that as we watch the breath going in and out, we are aware of that, but not tightly, in a very open, spacious way. We are not trying to make the mind rigid. We are not trying to get rid of the thoughts. Thoughts are not the problem. It's natural for the mind to think. It's one of the glories of being a human being, is that we can think. Nothing wrong with thinking. The problem with thinking is only that we get lost in our thoughts and that we identify with our thoughts. But the thinking itself is just thinking. So what we are trying to learn is how to be aware or mindful of what is going on in the present moment. To bring our mind into the present moment. So before we were talking about activities during the day, now we're talking about formal meditation, where we sit and we learn how to recognize awareness. Because we are always aware, but we don't recognize that. And so the really fundamental point is to recognize what we already have, which is our awareness. And to help us with that, then we use some object. But the object is not the important point. The awareness is the important point. So we can use any object. Doesn't matter. For example, if we are sitting and concentrating, bringing the awareness, knowingness to the breathing. All we're doing is breathing, but we know we're breathing. That's the point. Normally we are breathing, we don't know we're breathing, we've forgotten completely. I mean, we have other things to do, but also we are automatically breathing in and out. Now all we're doing is just sitting, breathing, and knowing we're breathing. That's it. And then there's a noise. But that noise, somebody shouts or there's some noise going on outside, and we know that, we hear it. So then we're aware. It's not an obstacle to the meditation. Now that becomes the meditation, the noise. Right? We just hear it and we know we're hearing it. And then if the noise stops, we bring it back to our breath again. So in this way, we're not altering the mind. When our awareness, our ability to be present and know has become strong, and we recognize it, we can feel it, we know it, oh, this is awareness, then we can turn that back onto the mind itself. We're not trying to stop the thoughts. We're observing the thoughts. I mean, the most of you were not here yesterday, but he starts off with this about the supreme oral instruction is to observe the mind at all times. So we went through this yesterday, those of you who were here, how to observe the mind. But we start by observing something less slippery, like the breath. And then when we've cultivated the ability to be aware, then we bring that awareness onto the mind itself. We're not trying to stop the mind. We're trying to know the mind. Hmm? So maybe we will just have 5 minutes of that, and then we will take any questions if there are any questions, okay? So all we have to do, okay, it's very, very simple. We're not trying to alter the mind, as Atisha says. So what we need to do is just to sit nicely. Try to keep your feet on the ground, but if the chair is too high, never mind. Just sit nicely, keep the spine erect but not stiff. And your hands either in your lap or on your knees. And then maybe close the eyes, because it's a lot of people here and you might find them. If you are comfortable keeping the eyes open, then you keep the eyes slightly open and down. But if that's a distraction with so many people, then you can close the eyes lightly. And then first, just experience being in this room. Then in the body. Then just bring the attention gently to the breath. Breathing in and then breathing out. And keep the attention especially on the out breath, that sense of open spaciousness, very relaxed, not tense. We're just breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. And just be aware of that. We have nothing to do but sit here breathing and knowing that we are breathing. And if we get carried away by the thoughts, as soon as we recognize that, then just drop that, bring it back to the breath. No problem. Okay, so we just sit now for 5 minutes, just being aware of the coming and going of the breath. So, does anyone have any questions? Yes. Somebody please collect. If you have any questions, please write them on your little books, or if you don't have any little books, you can. Okay. So this is right. You said that one of the precepts of Buddhism is not to take life. So does Buddhism denounce non-vegetarian diet? Is this also followed in monastic life, being a vegetarian? Well, the answer to that is, on the whole, no. The Buddha said that the Buddha and his monks at the time, and of course in Thailand and Burma nowadays also, they went on alms round. And so one was not supposed to discriminate what was put into the begging bowl. You couldn't go around with a little notice saying, I am vegetarian. You just had to accept whatever anybody put into your bowl. And you were allowed to eat meat if it was pure in three respects: that one had not killed the animal oneself, one had not asked for anyone to kill it on one's behalf, and that one had no knowledge that this meat was prepared on behalf of oneself, that somebody knew you were coming and so they killed their chicken or something. So if, in other words, one is in no way involved with the death of the animal, then it was considered permitted to eat it. And therefore in Theravadan countries such as Sri Lanka and Thailand and Burma, the monks normally do eat meat. They eat whatever is given. Fish also, a lot of fish they eat. In the Mahayana countries such as Korea and China, Vietnam, etc., because there are sutras which specifically prohibit eating meat, therefore normally the Sangha, the monastic Sangha, the monks and nuns are strict vegetarians, and likewise most of the devout lay people. And the monasteries, especially the nunneries, become quite well known for their very delicious vegetarian food. And so people go there on special moon days and have vegetarian meal. In Tibet, the climate, because it was so high and so cold, it was very difficult to grow much there, especially vegetables. And so mostly and in that high climate also was very hard on the body. And so normally they were not vegetarians. And a few very important lamas were vegetarians, but of course it was quite a restricted diet if you were vegetarian. There wasn't much else to eat. But still, nonetheless, some very, very famous lamas were vegetarians. However, I have to say that, now the Tibetans have been in India for 60 years, and it's about time they changed their diet. India being the capital of vegetarianism throughout the world. I mean, it's the easiest country in the world to be a vegetarian. It's the one country where not only you see continually vegetarian restaurants, pure vegetarian restaurants, but also when you have other restaurants, they are veg and non-veg. So veg is put first, right? So I mean, this is a pure land for vegetarians, actually, compared with like France or Germany. And so now gradually more and more there is an awareness coming in, even in Tibetan circles. There are groups of especially young people who are showing quite horrific videos of animal farming. which shocks people because people just see the meat and they don't think where it comes from, how it came about. And once they see that, then it does change people's minds. Nunneries were, I think, among the first to become vegetarian. Certainly our nunnery has always been vegetarian at the request of the nuns from Ladakh. Our first nuns were Ladakhis, and they requested that it should be a vegetarian nunnery. And I myself have been a vegetarian since I was in my early 20s. And the monasteries now have gradually also become more and more vegetarian. One after the other have changed. And although usually there is not any particular, looking into what the monks eat when they're not in the monastery, at least in the monasteries, they nowadays don't take meat. And I notice in our own monastery in Himachal that whereas before at picnics, the majority of the dishes offered were contained meat. Nowadays, none of. Then it was half and half. Then it was 2/3 vegetarian, 1/3 still meat. Now it's all totally vegetarian, and so they are improving, is all I can say. And also many lay people now recognizing that high blood pressure and cholesterol often is caused by eating red meat. Have become vegetarian. So it's getting better. It's not perfect, but it's better than it used to be. So, but of course, if you take a vow that you are going to save all sentient beings and all sentient beings are our mothers, and then you go down and eat a plate of meat momo, it's a little bit hypocritical. No, I won't tell you that. It's even worse. Okay, so yes, so nowadays more and more in the Buddhist world, at least in the Tibetan world, and in the Mahayana world, they're already vegetarian. In the Tibetan world, they are becoming increasingly vegetarian. So things are better than they used to be. How does one deal with the very strong imprints of the emotional trauma one has dealt with in the past? The elephant has passed, but the footprints remain. Well, of course, when people take up meditation, they often assume that they're going to find themselves in states of bliss and clarity, and everything's going to be absolutely beautiful. And so sometimes it comes as a great shock to recognize that when the mind becomes more pacified, that often what comes up are fear, that's very common, anger, and traumatic memories. It's as if normally we are living on the surface of our mind. If you think of the mind like an ocean, then we are living on the waves and the slight undercurrents of our ordinary conceptual thinking and our emotions. So that's where we are on the surface. And we don't know that there is an whole ocean underneath. But as the surface waves begin to get quietened down, we sink below the surface. And as we go down and down into the deeper levels of our consciousness, yes, we may meet with friendly dolphins and beautiful goldfish, but there are also sharks and jellyfish and monsters of the deep, killer whales and so forth. You never know what you're going to meet. So often people are very distressed by discovering that they feel worse than when they started, because all these feelings and emotions and memories which were suppressed are now given the freedom to rise to the surface. And so a lot of questions come up about how to deal with these very unwelcome guests in our mind. And so it's very important to allow these feelings and emotions to arise. Not to try to suppress them again, but to give them the freedom to come up to the surface finally. And to welcome them. We welcome thoughts, feelings of bliss and clarity, but we don't welcome feelings of fear and anger and very difficult memories. But we have to give them space. That's the only way to deal with them. So, for example, if you have a very difficult memory or a feeling of fear, even one fear without any object, just fear, but not knowing what the fear is from, or anger, or strong lust, or any feelings which come up, to give them the room to come up, the space to come up, and not be so interested in the content, but the feeling. Where is this emotion in the body? Because usually the body is responding to. Where is that feeling? What does the feeling feel like? How is it? And to, as it were, embrace it, not to try to see it as the enemy, but to welcome it, to embrace it. Yesterday I told the story of Milarepa and the demons in his cave. And it's like that. We can't get rid of them just by trying to, expel them or say, oh, it's all emptiness. But they are integrated through our ability to make friends. So that doesn't normally just happen just like that. It takes time. But as we make friends with our demons, they transform of themselves. We don't need to do anything to change them. We just have to listen and accept them. So first we recognize, then we accept, then we really know how to make friends with even the darkest side of our natures. And in this way, of itself, it will transform. But the important thing is not to fear, not to be angry with anger, not to put another head on top of the whatever we've got already, but to open and recognize. In the Tibetan tradition, we start by taking refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. Then we recite the Bodhisattva vow, which is the vow that I am practicing here for the sake of all beings. All beings, I am on their, as I said, like their representative. I'm their substitute. I'm doing this on behalf of all beings. Then they do what is called Guru Yoga, which means that you visualize your teacher and you pray to him to bless one's mind. And then the teacher dissolves into light and comes to the crown of the head and then enters as light into the heart, the heart mind, which is at the center of the heart chakra. And then one thinks that one's own mind and the teacher's mind have blended like water into water. There's no difference. And what we are taking is not the guru's conceptual mind and his personality. What we're taking is his innate, pure Buddha nature mind. The pure mind which we all possess, but which we don't recognize. Our pure primordial awareness, which is completely perfect, completely pure, and is something which is our true nature, beyond duality of self and others. This goes beyond all of that. It's our primal awareness mind. which is compared sometimes to the sky, because it's all pervading. You can't divide it up, me, you, her, not like that. It just is. And so that is what we are going for refuge to with the teacher, not his ordinary personality and how he looks and, all that, not that. But the fact that he has Buddha nature, I have Buddha nature, but he knows his Buddha nature, I don't know mine. So then we are dissolving that into ourselves and recognizing that the nature of his mind, the nature of our mind is exactly the same, it's completely pure, it's completely beyond concepts. It is totally unconditioned. So then, from that state, we meditate. And therefore, whatever comes up protected by that space, that inner knowledge that we are totally pure and perfect. There's nothing that can ever pollute the pure sky-like nature of the mind. And because of that, we have that confidence that whatever comes up can never harm us. Any past traumas are past. They're just imprints on the consciousness. But it's not happening now. Right now, I'm just sitting. It's okay. You can come up. You can tell me what is wrong. And I will love you. And that slowly, gradually dissolves these imprints. Because they're welcomed. They're not hidden anymore. And we know that the nature of the mind is never affected, no matter what we have been through, what traumas we have known, what horrors we have experienced. Nothing affects the nature of the mind, just like the sky. However thick and black the clouds, however heavy the storms, the sky is just the sky. We see that when we are in aeroplanes. Sometimes in very monsoon season, we go through those thick, thick, thick layers of clouds, and then suddenly there is the vast blue sky, totally uncontaminated by what's going on below. However thick the smog in Delhi never affects the sky. So this is how to deal with these feelings which come up. It's good that they come up, they're being released, they're saying, please listen to me. Give me freedom. Because they've been imprisoned so long. I'm not sure about who is observing and realizing the nature of the mind. Is it the mind looking at itself? Well, this, of course, is a very important question. Can the mind observe the mind? This level of mindfulness or awareness is still quite dualistic. There is the mindfulness which is observing the object, right? So there is a subject and there is an object. So mindfulness is very important. It's a very important bridge. But it is not in itself ultimate reality because it is still dualistic. There is an observer and an observed. But when that ability to be aware becomes strong, then eventually it dissolves into a deeper level, a whole consciousness shift into our primordial awareness, which is non-dualistic. In other words, there is the seeing but no seer. There is perception but no perceiver. Now this sounds very horrible and blank, but as I explained yesterday, it actually has a feeling of waking up. That our ordinary consciousness that we live in is still like sleepwalking, compared with the clarity of non-dualistic awareness, which is the nature of the mind. So then there is no who, because this is where the ego has completely dissolved. And the mind opens up into a whole different level of consciousness, which is our true nature, but which is usually locked from us, covered over by the fact of our clinging to the idea of a who, of an ego. That covers up the non-ego state, which we all possess, but is normally closed to us. So the question is therefore, on a dualistic relative level, there is a perceiver and a perceived, but at the ultimate level, we transcend all of that. It is a whole different shift in consciousness, which we all possess. The sad thing is that although this is our true nature, and we couldn't have even our ordinary awareness if it was not for this unborn primordial awareness, nonetheless, normally we never recognize it. And meditation is to open us up to that, which is beyond words, which is beyond concepts. Anything we say about it, it's not really that. So it's said to be the union of emptiness. Emptiness in the sense you can't grasp it, like space. You can't see it. As I said yesterday, if we look in the room and then we think there are people, there are chairs, there's statues, but really what there is space. And none of these things could exist if it was not for the space. Just as none of our thoughts and feelings could exist if it was not for the space of our awareness in which they arise up and they sink down. But we get caught in the thoughts and the feelings and we don't see the space. So moment to moment to moment, there is space there. There is the primordial awareness is there, but we don't recognize it. And so this is also why we need to learn how to observe the mind, because it's sort of like, if you have a movie, right, in a cinema, then there's a screen, and the movie is projected onto that screen. And if it's a good movie, we're completely caught up in it, right? I mean, if it's a frightening movie, everybody's, if it's a romantic movie, oh. If it's a funny movie, everybody's laughing and, and so forth. So we are completely believing in what's happening up there. But if we look back, then what is actually happening is that there's a projector with all these little transparent frames which are moving very, very fast. And behind that is the light which sheds through those frames and projects the whole movie. So that's very like the mind. The clear light nature of the mind projects through all these little transparent frames of thought moments and projects our outer reality. This is why, as I said, His Holiness and many monks are very interested nowadays in neuroscience, because neuroscience is saying exactly the same thing. More and more and more, they are recognizing that almost everything which we take as our external reality is really just a projection of the mind. Doesn't mean that things don't exist. Of course they exist, but they don't exist how we think they exist, how we perceive it through the kind of sense organs and brain that we have. We fabricate our own reality. So as we look at the mind begins of itself, the thoughts, to go slower and slower and slower until maybe there is a gap between the past thought and the future thought. And in that gap, one sees the nature of the mind, the space-like nature of the mind, which is not just space. Unlike space, which is just space, the mind also is knowing. It's aware. That's its very nature. It's this luminosity. In Tibetan, it's very easy because the word is selwa. And that has the idea of clarity, of luminosity, and also of cognizance. We don't have a word in English which encourages all that. We don't know, so some people say clarity, some people say luminosity, some people say lucidity, some people say cognizance, because we don't have a word to cover all those things. In Tibetan, it's very easy, just one word, self. But that is the awareness, knowing quality of the mind. The mind is not just ungraspable and unseeable, but it also knows. And so that is what we have to recognize. Usually just a glimpse, but that glimpse is like, in the monsoon when you just have clouds, 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 we could think, oh, the sky is just clouds, these thick black clouds. And then suddenly looking at those clouds, they part. Ah, there's the sky. The sky isn't clouds. The sky is sky. And then the clouds go back again. So then the task is to help the clouds to part more and more and more and more and more and more. When they're totally clear blue sky, Buddhahood. Until then, we're all working on the path with non-activity. I think that's all our answers, and I think we're... Yes. So the whole point is that there is ultimately no one watching the mind, but there is pure awareness, which is beyond self and other. And that is what we have to recognize. So, should we dedicate? And tomorrow, at the same time, we will go on and finish the text of Atisha. Rinpoche, please, will you dedicate? Ponchi ma che panam che juji che wanyam pa me payong kone gontu pe waisho. As I said yesterday, it's a Buddhist custom that whenever any good actions are performed, that is regarded as gathering good karma, which is called merit or punya, and then that is dedicated to all beings. The understanding being that if we don't dedicate it, then that good action, and the action here is that you came here and you sat through all this long blah, 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 that is regarded as being a good thing to have done. And so then normally that is a small amount of good karma, and like with a cup, with the liquid, then, you know, you have this much liquid, but then when we drink it, when that karma has been finished, then the cup is empty. But if we pour the water into a lake or an ocean, then it will never be finished. And so by dedicating the merit for the well-being of all beings in this world, not just humans, but also animals and fish and birds and insects and spirit realms and upper realms, lower realms, all beings throughout the universe, also in other galaxies that we don't know about, it's infinite. And so then even this little bit of merit becomes infinite and for the benefit of all beings. So therefore, at the end of any occasion which is regarded as auspicious, this is the tradition to dedicate. So thank you.